Hi, my name is Barry Joseph. I'm currently the Associate Director for Digital Learning in New York at the American Museum of Natural History. Congratulations to the new Linden CEO, Mr. Altberg, for taking the helm. We do hope he keeps a warm spot for the educational community. Our youth deserve it. Now, on with the Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley.
Hello and welcome to the Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley. My name is Draxter Dupre. We're here in 1920s Berlin in an attic above the former post office next to the police station. It's raining outside. I have a slight cold. You may hear that in my voice. Joe is here with me, chain smoking. Hi, Joe.
Hello, guten Abend.
So what are those, Chesterfield, those cigarettes?
No, of course not. Rothandel. It's German cigarettes with extra tobacco and tar and no filter, of course, because I'm not a wimp.
Fabulous. Before we get on today's show, and yes, we will be talking about the new Linden Lab CEO, Ebbe Altberg. He was announced Wednesday.
I think it's Ebbe.
Is that how it's pronounced?
My Swedish is not fantastic, but I just saw a YouTube video about someone called Ebbe.
In German, that means low tide.
Yeah, I know.
I'm just thrilled that we have another foreigner with us with an accent, so that's awesome.
I look forward to hearing his voice.
I look forward to him appearing on this show.
Absolutely.
Now, before we get to the body of the show, we have a sponsor on board. It's a big name. It's a hardware maker. It's a super cool device. If you want to start the guessing game, please do. We'll announce it formally next Friday. By the way, you can sponsor us too as a small individual or an in-world business of any size. We will not turn you down, but we do have limited banner space, which will start next week also. And we have a limit to support mentions at the end of the show. Those are limited to 10 per week. So call us, email us, or meet us in world. Also, please share your thoughts and experiences on bullying in virtual worlds or other online communities. We're preparing a special show, and this is also a continuous theme that we would like to explore. We really want to hear from you directly with personal stories. All right, Joe. So let's go right to the meat. The new Linden Lab CEO is Swedish. His name is Ebbe Altberg. Excuse me.
Ebbe Altberg. That's probably how I pronounce it.
So what do we know about him other than that he does play golf? I looked at his Twitter feed and he plays golf with someone whose last name is Esteban. I don't know if that's a coincidence.
Well, he's really crazy about Formula One car racing, which is nice because Rod was crazy about airplanes and flying.
What is really interesting is that he hopped on Twitter. Well, he was on Twitter, but he responded right away to residents welcoming him. He's already been on the forums chiming in.
We have to remember that he hasn't even started yet. He's going to start next Monday, and he is already in his own time tweeting and responding to tweets, and he's open so far. I mean, Rod Humble was very publicly communicating at first as well, so, let's keep those fingers crossed. But it's good. One
of the criticisms that I hear right away is this is someone who has no experience with virtual worlds.
At first, I was a bit worried because I'm seeing Microsoft Office and Yahoo and, all these big corporate things where they are all talking about technical stuff and making lots of profit. And I think that Second Life is a bit unique when it comes to how to fix it and how to run it. But talking to us on Twitter, he's already said that he's been in Second Life. And I don't know if that's happened, 5 seconds after he got the job or years ago, but at least he's been there. So, that is hopeful. And he seems keen, which is very important. I'm of course, we don't know how long it's going to last and if that's completely genuine. But I feel good about it. I think that he's excited and interested in the way, purely based on how he's responding to everyone on Twitter, because I wouldn't say flooded, but he's getting a lot of Twitter messages, and he's funny and friendly and open.
Of course, what we also have to keep in mind as Second Life enthusiasts that he is the CEO of Linden Lab, which has diversified under Rod Humble with other products. So he has to make sure that these other products are positioned as well. And for the record, I just want to take this opportunity community. I am a big fan of some of these products. For example, Creatorverse. And I hope, Ebbe, if you're listening, Creatorverse needs to be pushed into schools. It's a great tool. My first reaction when I heard this criticism about, oh my God, there's the corporate guy again who has no idea what's going on, I was reminded to an interview with my idol, Frank Zappa, where he talks about the music business in the 60s and compares hippies to old guys with cigars. And mind you, I'm not saying that Ebbe is an old guy with a cigar, but he's certainly not a hippie, judging from his headshot. Here we go. Here's Frank Zappa.
Remember the 60s? They really weren't that great those years. But one thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace. The old guy with a cigar, one day goes, well, I took a chance. It went out, and we sold a few million units. All right, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I need some advice. Let's get a hippie in here. So they hire a hippie. They're bringing the guy with the long hair. Now, they're not going to trust him to do anything except carry coffee and bring the mail in and out. He starts in there. He's carry the coffee. Well, we can trust him. He brought the coffee 4 times on time. Let's give him a real job. Okay, he becomes an A&R man.
I prefer men with cigars to hippies.
Well, if we paint a black and white picture, we started with Philip Rosedale for a hippie with a good haircut to a corporate guy, M, back to a British person with a hippie adjacent haircut, now to a corporate guy.
Yeah, we're testing the water.
We had a couple of friends call in with their thoughts and wishes for the new CEO. Strawberry Singh, a friend of the show, called in. Here she is.
Hi, this is Strawberry Singh, and I wanted to leave a message for the new CEO. I am looking forward to seeing what changes he has in store for us, and hopefully they'll be good ones. And I am kind of excited to learn more about him, and hopefully one day he'll also become a meme on my blog.
And then we had a guy call in from Scotland.
I love that accent.
Here's Victor Mornington.
What do you mean you might play it? Of course you'll play it, because I have a cool accent, like both of you. Hello, Joe. Hello, Drax. This is Vic Mornington from the city-state of New Babbage. Mr. Altberg, I hope you enjoy your stay in Linden Lab. And don't forget, Second Life is not just a game, it's a community. So try and interact with the community now and again. Not all the time. You're the CEO. I realise you're a busy man. But try and interact with the community now and again. You know, little Twitter feeds and blog posts and stuff just to keep everyone happy. Yes. Anyway, that's it from me. Have a good one.
I think that everyone is now telling Ebbe how to improve things and giving him ideas. Some of them are really good. But the thing everyone is repeating, it is in every post, on every blog, is we want communication. We want to be able to talk to Linden Lab, and we want them to respond to us. We don't expect Ebbe to personally respond to every tweet and email and be online with us all the time. You know, that will drive him mad. That will drive anyone mad. But we want more interaction with Linden Lab. We want to at least think that they're listening to us.
I also got a very special former Linden on the line just this morning before we started taping. Robin Harper, who was the Vice President of Marketing and Community Development at Linden Lab between 2002 and 2009, much beloved, left 4 years ago. We talked a little bit about what made or makes Second Life so special to her, and what type of advice she would give the new commander-in-chief.
Virtual worlds in the past have kind of come and gone, but Second Life hasn't. And the reason it hasn't, in my view, is the enormous investment people have because of the imagination and sheer work that they've put into what they have in that world. I was sort of heartened to see that after all this time, because it's been now about 4 years, I guess, since I left Linden Lab. At least the last time I checked, they were still using the same tagline, your world and your imagination. That line was meant to really capture the value of Second Life, the proprietary sense that people have and the ability that they have to shape their space. I think there are people who approach it as a blank canvas. They tend to be the more artistic folks. But for people like me who, didn't even know what a prim was, it was more the sense of place, because it didn't look blank to me. I felt like I was someplace. I'll never forget, this was before we opened up the grid. We had the first grid of four regions, and then we added several so that we had a total number of 16. And in order to get from one end to the other, you had to fly because it wasn't contiguous land. It was just, there was a bunch of islands. And I'll never forget flying over those islands. And I had some, bombastic movie soundtrack playing in my headset. And I was flying over the water and then across these islands, and there was nobody there because we hadn't opened it up yet. It was just such a profoundly freeing experience. It was unbelievable. The experience can be about creativity, but it can be very different depending on what you bring to it. And I think that's what makes it special. I haven't been in Second Life for 3 years, so I have to imagine, in many respects, the community hasn't changed. When I was responsible for thinking about how people interact within Second Life, so many of those questions and challenges had to do with policy, as opposed to just the magic of being able to make anything you wanted. That was there. Then it just became an issue of dealing with human nature. And interestingly, there are sets of rules for dealing with a lot of the problems that we were dealing with, but they vary by country, and that made things very difficult when you were trying to build one country that spanned many, because people brought their own cultural perspective to things. For the person who is going to take on Second Life, I think they have to recognize that it's an open environment, and that's what has brought people to it, and that's why they stay. And then in the course of being there, they make friends, and these are real relationships, and they create things, and these are real businesses. When you take on the job of managing Linden Lab, it really is like becoming the mayor. It's like you're taking on the job of managing this place that other people have created, and it's a real challenge.
So Robin compares the boss to the mayor with similar duties, much more than managing a tech problem or a tech company.
I've mentioned that in my blog as well. The new CEO is a bit like a prime minister, a king, or a president. Besides having to run a company, they are sort of running a world, because that's what we are. And we want him to do public announcements and stand in front of a board with a flag and say everything's well or this is going to change. He needs PR. He needs to be out there. He needs to act like someone in charge of a country, besides being someone who runs a company.
In the feature interviews a little bit later in the show, there's lots of more advice for the new CEO. We have a successful entrepreneur from the former Teen Grid on, and I also interviewed Barry Joseph from the American Museum of Natural History, who we heard in the Station ID. He's a real pioneer in the digital education community. I would encourage even listeners who have no interest in how youth uses digital media, stick around the show, because there's so much food for thought about communicating between different parties with different agendas, just also the issue of education in virtual worlds. Let's move on to my second topic here that I put down, bad journalism.
Oh, dear.
Just really briefly, because as Mr. Altberg comes in, Information Week publishes an article about High Fidelity, Philip Rosedale's new venture. And in that context, the quote-unquote journalist calls Second Life largely forgotten. Now, obviously, I'm sensitive on the subject, but I just cannot let this slide as a former full-time journalist myself. If I were an editor, I would have changed this sentence, SL largely forgotten, or that phrase, to something like, while SL certainly has not achieved status of the 3D web, it is thriving among artists and digital entrepreneurs, because those are the facts. I mean, what do you think about this? Isn't this a failure of mainstream media, or am I overreacting here?
I think you're overreacting. I mean, technically, they are right. I mean, I'm sorry, it hurts you, it hurts me. But Second Life is a has-been, and because people don't know what's going on.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry to interject, but why don't they know what is going on? Isn't that the responsibility of journalists to dig a little deeper?
Yes, a good journalist will visit the Linden Lab website, will do more than just Wikipedia and Google the subject. But then again, a good journalist would also not use a screenshot from 2007. Unless you use it, like you and me, you may think that it has not improved or changed at all.
But I do think that this is the vicious cycle. That if the press does not go out and find stories, if they just chase the squirrel like a dog, if they just chase the squirrel and then there's a different squirrel to the right and then they veer to the right and forget the other squirrel, I don't know if that's the purpose of the press.
Well, the purpose of the press these days is to print something that a few people will like, click, and will share on Facebook. And it is partially our job, and not just us, people who make this podcast, but all the users of Second Life, to make sure that people out there know that Second Life is still here, and that that the technology is moved on, and that we can make pretty decent screenshot these days. Like I mentioned in another episode, come out of the virtual closet and tell people about Second Life.
I do find it irresponsible if you call yourself a journalist to just write something like that perpetuates myths that are just not true.
Absolutely.
Especially because the person who wrote this used to be in Second Life, primarily with the business community and sort of writing these types of stories. I think it's legitimate to say that the business community did not succeed and that Second Life as a tool for telecommuting didn't succeed. I think
of course, you can't dismiss Second Life, because no matter what, it has been around for 10 years. It is still the biggest user-created online world there is, and you can't ignore that. But I read this article, and they said that people drive cartoon-like avatars. I mean, what? I mean, of course, our avatars are not top of the range and fantastically looking like in the most current computer games, but I wouldn't call them cartoons. I mean, maybe 5 years ago.
I mean, to say something like that is just, I don't know. I mean, if this is a fourth grade book report, sorry, that's an F.
It is someone who hasn't done their research, it seems.
Journalists have a megaphone. They can focus the debate on what they want it to be focused. They have that power and they should use it wisely.
Yeah, but I think that it is our job, us people of Second Life, to try and do something about it. And of course, Mr. Altberg, his job to make sure that at least people know that we've moved on.
Moving on really quickly, Project Spark, I just stumbled across it. It was already announced mid last year. Just because in the context of Linden Lab positioning themselves as a company for shared creative spaces, let's play the soundbite first. This is from the trailer for Project Spark. It's for the Xbox One. What is it? Is it a virtual world? Is it a game design platform? Let's listen to the soundbite.
I love games. They're all starting to feel the same. I believe there is more to gaming. Now, games I could only dream of making before are totally possible with Project Spark. Project Spark puts the power, joy, and freedom of creating worlds at my fingertips. I control how everything behaves with the tap of my finger. Playing is creating.
God, that video annoyed me. So smooth.
So Joe, just the context here, Linden Lab is positioning themselves as a creative spaces lab. Can they survive with this strategy when everyone is seemingly hopping on this bandwagon? What do you think?
Linden Lab does have this experience, and this background of doing what they're doing for a long time, and they have got quite a few people doing very interesting things in the lab. Everyone is suddenly realizing that virtual reality is going to be the next big thing, finally. And, there are companies who have billions of dollars stuffing it into all sorts of ideas. But one thing that everyone else so far seems to be getting wrong, and that Linden Lab has got right is that it offers the users absolute freedom. With this thing that this video that I've just seen with these sparks, which looks like fun, but it looks more like a game editor. You can build a few things and then create some games, which is fun, which is nice. But I'm pretty sure that I can't build a 1920s Berlin role-play city there. It doesn't look like something that offers that.
It also doesn't explain if you can, it says that you can share it, but the question is, can you invite others to be there in real time together with you and communicate? Yeah,
it isn't really about communication, or so it seems. It is very game-oriented. It is perhaps something that people wished Rot had brought into Second Life as an addition.
Well, I think that could be argued. I mean, their slogan is playing is creating, and you could say the game art is a form of art.
Yeah, of course, and you can do lots of great and interesting fun things, but it's not my cup of tea, and it doesn't seem like it offers the freedom that Second Life offers. And until they do that, and the same goes for High Fidelity or any other virtual world that is going to pop up in the next couple of years, if they don't offer me the freedom to build what is in my head, I'm not interested.
To me personally, really the defining factor is also the people and the community. I think that is the secret sauce. And again, it's ironic that the mainstream press also maintains that nobody is in Second Life, while that is just also not true in the sense that if there is a community, it's generally a very strong, tight-knit community. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the people that keep it alive.
So Sony enters the headset game. I wrote down here in the agenda. We can link to it on the blog. We don't have to go into detail. Again, we're not forgetting all these other hardware things, and we have guests lined up. So don't worry, listener. We'll get to all these people. We'll talk to the makers and shakers of the new hardware revolution. Linden Lab changes its bot policy. Joe, do you want to comment on that? Do you have an opinion?
Like most people, I can't afford land. It is a very rare thing for me to be able to buy land, and so I usually leave that to a friend of mine who can do mathematics, who can count further than 10. I had an experience with bots that buy land, but it seems like a fair thing. I mean, it's a bit like the eBay software that steals everything away from you. If I understood correctly, those bots would buy land at the very last second at the very best price. Which is annoying if you're standing there waiting there to make an offer. So it's not really fair. And if I understood correctly, I think it's good that those bots are now gone.
Now let's come to our feature interviews. I interviewed Mike McCullough, who was on the Teen Grid. Now the Teen Grid has been closed since 2011. It opened in 2005. It was a special place for just teens. It was merged with the main grid in 2011. There's many different opinions about that out there. If it was a good thing, if it was a bad thing, I hope we get a lot of comments on this. But regardless, this is something very dear to me. How do we harness the creative impulse in young people and provide more than just digital places to practice consumerism? And Mike McCullough from the Teen Grid is a great example. He's a virtual world developer. He was written about back then in the Wall Street Journal. So here's Mike McCullough, who started on the Teen Grid after he got into Habbo Hotel. Joe, that's still around, by the way, too. That's a virtual world. I think what he says is very instructional for anyone interested in the metaverse, especially from the Linden side. And Mr. Altberg, if you're listening, this is as much about community as it is about creative freedom and the economy.
I was only like 13. I spent like 2 years learning pixel art, and then I really wanted to learn 3D. I just was looking up 3D stuff, and I came across Second Life, joined, they sent me to the Teen Grid. I was just like, wow, this is amazing. Well, after finding out that it's not a game where you shoot people, I found a sandbox, and I started building a bed. And some other person saw me building this bed, and they said, how did you do that? And I said, well, I mean, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, I'll give you 200 Lindens if you build me one. And I was like, what?
Wait a minute. At this point, did you know that there is a currency? Did you have a concept of that?
I didn't really understand it. I didn't understand, like, I got 200 Lindens. I thought I was rich in there. I didn't understand what that was going to be in real dollars. He gave me 200 Lindens, and then I showed him how to build it. I just loved it. I was like, oh my gosh, I can make money. But my parents didn't understand, because I ended up having like 300,000 Lindens. And my parents were like, oh, yeah, you think this is real money or whatever. They didn't understand. And then my stepdad made a bet. He said, I bet if you can even pull $600 out of there, I'll give you double. I'll give you double whatever you pull out. So the next thing you know, 2 weeks later, I get a check for $1,200. And my stepdad just looking at me, and he's like, I'm not going to give you double what that is. but in the plus side, they didn't take my internet away.
They had no idea. They were just thinking you're just goofing off, you're playing.
Yeah, they're like, what is he doing? He has no job, because I left my job at KFC. They thought that. Then my stepdad was like, well, you only made pennies because of how many hours you spent. But then the next thing you know, I got in the Wall Street Journal. I got to Australia. And then they were like, all right, we believe you. You go do whatever you got to do.
The teen grid, the freedom to build and then also to monetize, and the social aspect of it is just, it's just really unique, and there's nothing really replacing it right now.
Well, here's the thing about Teen Grid is it was really great when I was there, but right after I was like leaving, the grid changed for the worse, because the copybotting, like the whole idea of Teen Grid was great is because you could build stuff and you could feel like you could make a living off of it almost, from doing this for the other people. But when people started copybotting professional work for Main Grid, nobody could compete with it, and they would just sell it for really cheap.
So people actually went to the Main Grid, they took stuff from the Main Grid and then flooded the Teen Grid with this high quality content.
Even when I was there was people with Main Grid accounts taking some ideas, but they still had to do it themselves. But when the copybotting came out, people just were playing on the Main Grid as teens.
Do you remember what the Linden response was at the time?
They would ban the account, but then they would just make another account. They just didn't have a way of taking care of that,
That really put a dent into your business model and others.
I guess I caught the very tail end, because then I moved to Main Grid. For me, it was just a shock, because I went from feeling like I was the best or being notified, head being blown up, to going to a grid where there was just people who were amazing. They went to school for it. And I just felt like I couldn't compete,
It's like a carpenter from Kansas going to New York City and wanting to open a store on Times Square.
Yes, exactly. But I was fortunate to make really good contacts who helped me get work. When I reached my prime in Prims, then Mesh came out, and I just didn't conform fast enough. And now I've learned Mesh, but it took me 6 months.
Well, but it's doable, right?
It is. You just have to realize you have to pace yourself and come up with some kind of plan, and that's what I did. The main reason I chose to learn Mesh is because I scored a big project with a very well-known name, because of my understanding of like how people use virtual spaces.
There you go. I think that is actually more of a important skill.
Exactly. And when I meet with people, I let them know, I said, you can have all these fancy designs, but if we don't spend the time to make this a functional thing, we're defeating the purpose, because, just go to a website and just buy a product. Why are they going to come to your sim,
Now, going back to the Teen Grid, in your time at the Teen Grid, there were Lindens that were very involved. Blue Linden, who I also met in real life, is a great guy, and Claudia. And so what was their role? Were they just sort of hanging out? Like, is it maybe similar to a youth center where there's kind of the cool adults that you can talk to when your parents act like jerks, or how was it?
So back in the real early days, in 2006, 2007, Linden's used to actually, like Blue Linden and Claudia, they used to have these meetings where they'd let the teens come in and hang out, and it was great. Blue and Claudia did a lot of maintenance. They'd clean up land, and they were my contacts. They were my go-to people. I'd say, hey, there's this parcel I really want to get freed up. It's abandoned, and they did a lot of favors for me, but I helped them a lot too with it, helping them understand what's happening on the grid. And
so you were a snitch. I'm sorry.
Well, I felt like,
did you somebody's acting like a jerk and they were like, I'm going to tell Blue?
Well, I really managed the grid. I felt like it was my responsibility to go around the grid and try to say, hey, this has to happen if you want this to happen. If we want this to work as a big function, everything has to happen. I can't just be the only one selling stuff. These people need to be selling stuff, and that has to not be people can't be stealing. I had to keep it going.
Were Blue and Claudia, the other Lindens, available when there was trouble? Did they mediate when you had trouble with another resident?
Well, they tried not to cater to me specifically because they knew that they couldn't just help everybody and they didn't want to favorite anybody.
Yeah, but that's the same problem you have as a high school principal. You don't want to take sides, but you need to step in when trouble is brewing, and I just imagine that to be really difficult.
I think that they did give me some seniority because of my age, because I was just borderline 18, I was just going to move over, and the things I was doing with the educational projects. So they took my word. They kind of trusted me. I felt like I was kind of a trusted member.
Tell me a little bit about the Scolaborate project.
So Scolaborate was collaborating schools from all around the world, over 10,000 students. They had like 12 islands. The very first thing they had me do was design this little school mock-up of like for them to bring their students in and like train. And the very first time I made it, I made road desks, like how it is here. And they were looking at me and they said, Mike, what did you do here? And I said, well, I made these road desks because they're going to teach class here. And they're like, no, we want to promote a learning environment. And I'm like, well, this is a learning environment. They said, no, all right, make tables and make them in circles and have them in little groups and make them different colors. And we're going to teach the class in groups. And I'm like, okay. Then they said, hey, make these so you sit on them and they fly you up in the sky so that they can be private. It's the stuff you can't do in real life.
Do you remember how big the Teen Grid was?
There was probably about 1,000 users.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from the longest time, the Teen Grid was always complaining about wanting to go to Main Grid. Actually, there was once a walk. In 2008, there was a walk where all these teens were trying to say, merge the grids. But it took 2 years for them to do that. They just wanted to merge it because of the copy body. And they said, it's just stupid to just split us up, And they decided, hey, we can just make it PG. Sims allow age of 16. And there's only 4 private Sims that teens really even own. So why not?
Do you think that was a good idea?
I think that it was because they weren't open to figuring out how to solve copy botting.
And it also created that separation, almost like a ghetto.
Yeah, they just felt like they were limited when they were on Team Grid. They felt like they
felt excluded.
Yeah, so they figured let's just combine them. But the people who are excluded were the people under 16. Well, they've of course made illegal accounts, and there's nothing really regulating that. I can't tell you there's a lot of people under 16 using Second Life.
No, so. I don't doubt it. Did friends move over with you to the Main Grid?
Yeah.
You still around with these friends?
I talked to them here and there. One of them, did you ever hear about Azuka Martin?
No.
She was one of the best skin designers on the Teen Grid. And then she went to art school, and now she works for Disney. And she helped produce Frozen.
No, that's a success story.
She actually taught me how to build. She actually taught me how to build with prims, like when I was brand new. And it was crazy. It was crazy because I didn't even know it was her alt. And then she told me who she really was. And I was like, oh my God, I'm talking to a famous person. Because in Teen Grid, she was famous. But then we became really good friends and we met in real life.
That leads me to another question. So you were able to make pretty much everything on the Teen Grid, building wise, right? Content wise. Do you know how was it supervised content wise? Did you have to go through a control process that you didn't produce content that was inappropriate? Who was policing that?
The people. Really the people. Someone reported it and then went to Linden.
So the Lindens weren't just always like looking around like, hey, what are you doing?
To some degree, a blue Linden used to kind of cruise around. Like he might notice something and be like, hey, this is not appropriate, Because like one time there was a sign next to Azuka's store. I had land next to her and I made a big sign that says Azuka sucks, but it was a joke. And I think Blue Linden saw it and somehow I got banned. And I contacted him. I was like, what the heck's going on? He said there was inappropriate content. I was like, it was a joke. So they unbanned me. I was like, the only time I've ever been banned, it was for putting up a sign that was a joke.
Now, final question. Now you graduated from college. And how are you now going to combine your passion? What's your life plan if you have one? I don't think people have to have one, but they could. How do you ideally see all your talents combining digital content making and real life, and how do you envision that?
So that's something I'm going through right now. I just graduated college. I have over 1.5 years experience with programming. I'm working full time now. The company hired me full time. Actively learning more 3D stuff. I want to get into 3D printing. I'm hoping that something's just going to click one day and I'm going to realize I can take this programming stuff with this 3D stuff and just do something new and just and be on it, you know? I'm hoping, you know? And I'm sure if I keep pursuing it, it's just going to click one day.
But your passion for virtual worlds has not ended, and virtual worlds are not dead.
No, not at all.
What advice would you give the incoming CEO, because we're also headless right now at Linden Lab? Do you have any advice for them, for him, her?
I would make the number one priority of Linden Lab this year to connect with residents. They don't really understand what the user needs. They think they understand, and they're tackling some big underlying issues, but there's so many little things that if they just did, we could wait for the bigger fixes, you know?
So this was Mike McCullough. This interview, I think, is a lot about the relationship also between residents and the administration. It's a lot about communication. And Mike mentioned something that I thought could maybe implement it as sort of an ambassador program.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, we've just talked about how we see our new CEO a bit like a mayor or a president or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that the more we see Second Life as a real virtual world that should be managed like a real world, the more logical it seems that we should have some sort of representatives.
Mike mentioned educational programs on the Teen Grid, and one of the most important, in my opinion, was Global Kids out of New York City. It was an after-school enrichment program, and they entered the Teen Second Life space in 2006. They held workshops on foreign policy and human rights issues. They made machinima documentaries about child soldiers in Uganda and international sex trafficking. Not something that you would usually assume that 13-year-olds want to be tackling in their spare time, but these kids did. It's insanely cool. This is our next interview. Barry Joseph, he was the former director of online leadership at Global Kids. He's currently the associate director for digital learning at American Museum of Natural History in New York City. Here is Barry Joseph about how they got started with Global Kids with one island.
It was the first island owned by any outside organization. I mean, yes, there were Lindens that did work with youth, but there were no public islands run by any educational institutions. And it began a process of a number of years of more and more institutions coming in. After 2 or 3 years, there were dozens of islands there, so many that they had to reorganize the physical aspects of the entire grid. So youth would know that if they crossed a certain line, there might be adults they'd run into who were on islands that they were managing as opposed to islands that youth were managing. And that happened actually as a result of massive youth protests. We had some wonderful 3D graffiti telling us to leave our own islands. The Teen Grid for teens. But once they understood that we could, delineate a space and they can choose to come or not, and we would never go to their space, that was all worked out, and that worked quite well for a number of years until not only were the adults kicked out, but all the teens were, and the Teen Grid was closed. End story.
That's awesome. And the Lindens that worked on the Teen Grid, would you describe it kind of like a youth center where there are the adults that are the cool adults?
I would say yes about the relationship, that these were adults who were there as mentors, who the youth had tremendous respect for. But it wasn't like a teen center. The youth felt like they ran the space. They, just like anyone else in the main grid of Second Life, they owned the land. They leased them to each other. They ran the malls, and you had the same economic structure you saw in the main grid. But well, in the main grid, we see this in the real world, adults owning places. You don't see this in the real world with teens. Teens don't own physical vast lands or properties and then engage with other young people in these major economic systems. So it was remarkable. So on one hand, you had, yes, the Lindens who were there to make sure it was safe, to provide mentorship, and every once in a while provide some activities. But the boundaries at which they actually controlled it, being Lindens, then got blurred, and then the youth got to have their own economics and democratic space.
So they had an economic relationship and exchange, but they also, you just mentioned, it's a democratic structure. They had to get along. They had to sort out their differences really amongst themselves within their own society.
So I say democratic, but it probably would be more accurate to say anarchic, which there were certain things you couldn't do that were against the rules of Second Life. But then they had to make it work. People will recognize each other's self-interest and come up with an equilibrium that makes sense. And so, when youth would go over those lines, they could be turned into the Lindens. But otherwise, they determined and shaped their culture. They decided what spaces would allow for, P2P, physical contact in a play space, and where was it more to, respect one's builds and be creative.
Was there griefing going on? Bullying?
As an adult in the teen grid, my space was locked to my own island. So we would see their culture when they would bring it into our spaces, but I couldn't go onto their space and see theirs. So we only know what they tell us.
But how would that have been dealt with if it had occurred? I mean, was there then the abuse report system? Was that the only recourse?
So the rules were the same as the main grid, where people who did inappropriate behavior could be reported on. I don't think there were extra sets of rules for young people. I don't think that the youth had to act better than adults had to act, so to speak. Now, I, as an adult, might not call on you for bullying to the Lindens, because as an adult, there might be a sense that that's not an okay thing to do. Well, youth, we are trying to teach and encourage to say this is not okay behavior. This isn't about what's possible. This is about what happened. Young people who were in teen Second Life, especially back in the beginning, were young people who were often young people who had problems in school socially. They were often homeschooled as a result. They might have had medical issues that made it difficult for them to engage in traditional educational activities. And Second Life became a way for them to, get past their autism, which prevented them from talking to people in life, but they could talk to, in real life, talking to people with their voice, but they could talk to people in Second Life, or youth who could really geek out and create an identity for themselves as economic entrepreneurs or creative people or people who can organize events. And they were there to make the place work for themselves and have a place where they could be accepted and accept others.
So Global Kids, you did amazing work harnessing the creativity, engaging them. Give me examples. The first thing was the child sex trafficking.
It wasn't like young people were walking around Teen Second Life saying, gosh, I wish someone would talk to me about child sex trafficking. I mean, that just wasn't on their minds. But when we said this is a topic that we're teaching in our programs, we'd like to teach it to you in a summer camp setting, where they went to a summer camp in Second Life and they built a maze, a giant maze, that as you went through it, you encountered images and texts about child sex trafficking. But more important, the experience of the maze was designed to be, from their perspective, as they understood it, what it was like to be trapped in a system of child sex trafficking and what it meant to get out through people collaborating and supporting one another. So they then left Global Kids Island to then teach others throughout Teen Grid about what they'd learned. We realized this was an opportunity to actually bring what Global Kids did in person, experiential, hands-on education in an after-school space about global issues to develop youth identity as global citizens, and actually run the same exact programs in Second Life, but do it with what we used to call the surreal physics. So we might do an activity in person where you have to stand up for your beliefs, and we might make a statement, and if you agree with it, you go to one side of the room, and if you disagree, you go to the other. But now we could do it in Second Life, and instead of walking, they would fly. And instead of doing it on the ground, they could build their own creation that we can be doing in. And the more we did work in Second Life at Global Kids, the more we saw that running a program in Second Life could have the same educational goals as a real after-school program, but would have new educational outcomes as well, which would rely on the young people to actually help construct and build the program.
With the machinima, you kind of did that also by giving the group different roles akin to a Hollywood film production team, right?
That's right. So with the machinima program, we, from the big picture, had the young people choose the topic they wanted to educate other teens about through making machinima and produce it. And after they would choose their topic and write their script, they would have to acquire or build the sets, the costumes, recruit extras, direct them. The first film was about former child soldiers in northern Uganda. And I always remember the shot where they had to have all of the kids who had just been taken from their homes. They're now in the camp where they're going to be trained to be soldiers. And they had to have them all sleeping on the ground, all huddled up, cold. And we had all these, just kids in Teen Second Life who showed up for the day, got into the costumes provider for them, and the other kids, some of them are setting up the camera shots where the camera was going to track around them in this building, and the other person, the director, was having all of them get into position and huddle up into little balls and be in the right by each other in the right location. And that was just a great example of what was possible. Teams in Second Life did make machinima, but nobody did anything at this scale before, and nobody had access to some of the technical tools that have been developed in the main grid by adults for filming, but we, through working with the Lindens, were able to bring those objects over, give them to the youth, and they can use these sophisticated tools for making movies, which have now been seen by tens of thousands.
The kids that come to the Global Kids program, where do they come from? How do you select them? Who are they?
Global Kids is a New York City-based after-school organization, primarily based in public schools. We also have our own center, and we run programs there as well. Youth who come to our programs usually don't get a stipend. They're not getting paid. They're not doing it because they need class credit. They're doing it because there's something deeply meaningful for them. And it's a way for them in their most usually marginalized communities to find an outlet where there's adults who respect them, who will support their abilities to pursue their interests and develop their leadership skills, and more often than not, help them focus on thinking more strategically about their future. Because we're based in schools, most youth find out about us because, one of Global Kids trainers shows up in a classroom someday and say, come to a program today, you can do some cool stuff and we'll give you some pizza.
Now, back in Second Life, when the Teen Grid was absorbed into the main grid, how did you feel about this decision?
Well, there was always a problem with Linden Lab's relationship with the Teen Grid. It seemed like it was created not in a proactive but a reactive way, which is to say it wasn't created to meet needs that were identified for youth and then there were outcomes around that. It was created instead to prevent youth from being in the main grid, the liabilities that would cause. Now, yes, of course, we don't want teens in the main grid with many of the activities that adults chose to engage with. However, it wasn't for many years that Linden Lab actually put in place what was required to keep teens away in the main grid. We always knew during the time of Teen Second Life, and when I say we, I mean the youth and the adults, that there were more teens in the main grid of Second Life than the teen grid. That was no surprise. There was nothing to prevent you from going. The teen grid then was just a safer place and a youth-only place to go. But when it became time for Linden Lab to say, well, what resources does this space actually need, they weren't committed to support that. I think many youth were in both places. Of course, there was just more to do in the main grid. If Second Life is all about user-generated content, where's most of the content? It's on the main grid. It's not that the adults were better. There was just more there. It was always a problem, and Linden Lab had to choose something to do about it. One of them was to figure out how to restrict access to mature areas in the main grid, which they did, and that was good. But they also had to figure out how do they actually put resources behind what youth needed. And they chose not to do it through building out the teen grid and instead closing it and figuring out ways to have youth be safer in the main grid. Now, that's not a bad thing, but much of what was also supporting youth in that space was the role of educators. And they chose to stop privileging educators as preferred customers and making it more economically feasible for them to come in. And while I still think there's tremendous educational potential for Second Life for working with young people, and we do that now at the museum, they went elsewhere. They went to Minecraft, they went to World of Warcraft, they went to other places, let them have more control over what they were doing. And so Teen Second Life in many ways created and aggregated a tremendous, great community, both nationally and internationally, and got them thinking about virtual worlds. And I haven't seen or heard about a return to Second Life since amongst that community.
The discount has returned, and Linden Lab has, for the past year almost, I think, contacted educators directly to try to bring him back. But at the time when the Teen Grid was the only game in town, the question really is, why didn't it take off back then? Like Minecraft does now.
For me, the problems for why it didn't take off with youth was very similar to why it didn't take off for educators on a broader level. There was too much of a learning curve. There were too many glitches you had to put up with. You had to update your browser, But at the same time now, I still think there's something that Minecraft has that Second Life has never had. When my son started playing Minecraft, what really got him into it was playing on his mobile, on the PE, right? The Pocket Edition, right? And he would play in the creative mode, right? Which meant there were no monsters, and he had access to all the resources in the world. And once he did that for a while, he stopped, and he started playing the survival mode. Now it meant that there could be monsters, but he made it peaceful, which meant there were no monsters, but it meant that he had to work for every single resource. Now, why would somebody go from having all the resources in the world to choosing to have none? That's a game design. There was something in the game that motivated him to find value in creating and finding things. There's nothing in Second Life that is structured in the same way from a psychological perspective, from a motivation perspective, that helps users engage with the space and find meaning in it. Its magical promise has always been you could do anything, but I think that's always been a heavy burden to lift. And only certain people are willing to say, well, great, I can do anything. I will now find meaning in it. Rather than Minecraft says, you got 10 minutes or the zombies are coming. You better get some, a place to hide or get some torches.
Oh, God, I think you put your finger right on something that I absolutely acknowledge, but in my idealism, I want the world to be different.
Listen, we want young people to be self-motivated. That's this ideal, right? Self-motivated young people who know their minds, that know what they want to learn, can access resources and then activate it. But most young people in our traditional schools are learned not to know what they want to do. They aren't taught how to learn, how to think critically. When you give them an environment where they're required to be self-motivated, where they're required to construct their own learning experience, they mostly have had it knocked out of them. And so scaffolding is often required to get youth back on that path. That's part of what Global Kids was doing in Second Life and the other adults that were running educational activities. We were providing a space to help youth learn how to use those resources. Minecraft does a great job of giving youth that support and scaffolding they need to get in there to figure out what they want to do. I respect them. I think that's fine, but I think this is less about the abilities of young people and how media is designed for them than it is about the failings in our education systems to help young people be able to use the powerful affordances that wide open spaces like Second Life. And that's why I think when you go back to looking at Teen Second Life and you see the youth who were there, they were, for example, these homeschooled youth or young people who really were super motivated and engaged and couldn't find anywhere else to express it. And that's a wonderful thing. But that's a tip of the iceberg of youth culture. And we don't want to idolize them and say, why can't everyone else be like them? It's not going to help the rest of young people in society be able to be as engaged on their own unless they get other support.
Fabulous. I mean, we have a new CEO at Linden Lab coming in. It's exciting what direction that woman will take. Maybe there will be more investment in that sector, in your sector.
I hope so too. When I tell people I'm doing stuff in Second Life with the museum, people say, oh, Second Life is still around? But of course it is. The ability for Second Life to still be around, engaging people with user-generated content in a virtual world environment that's rich and compelling with a deep cultural community, it gives you hope that there can be a resurgence. And when it does, we'll be able to re-engage people and show with all the new tools like Oculus Rift and the other tools that we'll be using to shape our digital lives, how virtual worlds can offer us something to enhance and augment the rest of our lives. We as museums, especially natural history museums, are all about space. It's getting people into a particular space, populating it with objects and creating a context to give them meaning. So what does it mean if you don't need to go physically to our space to still experience what we're all about, but still have a spatial metaphor behind it? Engage with it from an embodied perspective where you got to go into the dioramas and be part of them and build them yourself. It's a rich, rich world of new possibilities for how to engage youth in our existing museum programs on site, as well as how we can engage youth who can never make it to the museum in the first place.
All right, so that was Barry Joseph. Again, in this interview, a lot of food for thought. The relationship between youth and the admins from Global Kids is kind of like the Lindens and the Main Grid residents now, but in this interview, the educators and their relationship to Linden Lab. What can the new CEO do? What do you think? Getting the educators back, how important, first of all, is it to get them back? Is it important at all to get them back?
I think so, yes. I mean, I use Second Life for education. I dress it up as role-playing, but I'm teaching those people stuff, even if they don't want to. Yeah, I think it's very important, not just for the users, but also for the reputation of Second Life. You know, 1920s Berlin, sorry to bring it up again, but that's where I live. We've had language courses. We talk about art, we talk about history, we talk about daily life. We're having a seminar on women in the 1920s. We have a library,
And just going up and down the street is an education in Bauhaus.
And, we are now watching 1920s movies and discussing them and gotten interested into the 1920s cinema, into this abstract stuff that was happening at the time, are suddenly seeing these movies that they would never watch, and they're loving them and they're learning all these new things.
And it's in a role-playing context, like you said, so it's a playful context that is fun.
We are watching a 1920s German movie. We're watching Metropolis, a fantastic movie that is these days only shown in art house cinemas almost. Of course, in between, people are typing that they're throwing peanuts at someone in the front row, or they're smoking cigarettes, or they're saying, get down in front. but they are sitting there for 2-3 hours discussing it and learning about it. So it's a really great tool.
It's immersion. It's immersion. That's what it is. And
immersion is the key word.
And I'm glad that Barry Joseph will have it on the blog. We'll have contextual links. Barry is doing a big project this summer with the American History Museum. Adventures in Science. This leads me back to the responsibility of the press, because I am involved with some educational projects that I can't talk about right now. And I know there are many, many others. It certainly hasn't completely disappeared, and there's the possibility of bring this back. I do think the press needs to dig a little deeper and find those types of stories that are out there. It's amazing what is possible. We all know that, and that's what we're doing this podcast. Let's just sign off because Dweezil Zappa is playing tonight, and I have to go see him. So
damn it.
But seriously, the cool things to do, the recommendations. We didn't have time to mention this last time. You discovered a Second Life magazine. What is it? What is it all about, Joe?
Yes, there's a new magazine. It's called Love to Decorate SL. It is a really nice magazine. It is about lots of cool stuff that you want to have in apartments. But the special thing about it is that it has the most amazing pictures. It is really well photographed, and it is worth looking up. And these are the kind of pictures that you could show to outsiders and say, what do you think about this interior?
Yeah, and the layout is just like any other high-gloss fashion magazine. I actually thought about going to print it out and put it on the coffee table and just see what happens if somebody comes over and says, oh, what's that? And I said, well, that's not real. That's just virtual.
Yeah, it's a really good idea. And it's a really well-made magazine. And I'll be completely honest, I am not that interested in modern decoration and fashion and all those things.
No kidding. You don't even have an electric stove.
Exactly. I'm very old-fashioned. But if it impresses someone like me who is hasn't bought a new piece of furniture in, let's say, 20 years. It is impressive.
All right. Very cool. So what I mentioned, I'm going to see Dweezil Zappa, the son of my biggest idol, who passed away way too early, and he's playing his father's music. I think he found his calling. Zappa plays Zappa. Has nothing to do with Second Life, although there's a bunch of Zappa fans, and there was a sim called Joe's Garage, or at least a club. Maybe there's a place for us Zappa fans to congregate. So, Joe, fabulous, and thank you for being with me, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Auf Wiedersehen.
And let's take us out with some music today, Second Life resident music, that is. By the way, please send us your stuff so we can play it too. This tune is called All Because of You, and it is by Second Life musician Terry Lynn Melody. And I leave it up to the listener if you think the you in the title perhaps is meant to be about a certain virtual world. It could be. You be the judge. Here's Terry Lynn Melody with All Because of You.
A golden ray of light I spy, cutting through the darkest night, and all at once I know that I can fly. And it's all because of you. Yeah, you and I love, and I dream, and I dance, I sing, and it's all because of you. I am bold, and I'm free, and I'm strong. I'm me, and it's all because of you. Yes, you. Now I can see beyond the years, and I have conquered all my fear, and there is no sorrow in these tears, and it's all because of you. Yes, you and I love, and I dream, I dance,
Joe's Radio Hour with Joe Yardley is a weekly production of Basic Drax Entertainment. The show is supported by Ciaran Laval, Inara Pei, Canary Beck, Daniel Voyager, Arten Rotaru, Masami Kuramoto, Mona Aberhart, Bear Silvershade, Global Kids, and Maddie Gynoid. Special thanks to Barry Joseph for providing the station ID this week. Music by Terry Lynn Melody. Contact the show via Skype Drax Files, Avatar Drax Files, or email radio@draxfiles.com.
Bold and I'm free. I'm strong enough to be me. And it's all because of, yes,